Record. Welcome everybody, nice to see you today. This is the salary negotiations workshop, and we're excited to see so many folks here. We know this is kind of a hot topic, so thanks for taking time out of your busy day today to join us, and we hope this workshop is helpful for you and provides some helpful information no matter where you are in your kind of job search process or career process. My name is Megan Spalding, and I work here in the Albers School. I'm in the Albers Placement Center, and we are the career center for the business school. So we support undergrad and grad students in Albers with career planning, career exploration, and job and internship search. A couple of my teammates, actually all my teammates are here, Mary Lou Moffitt, Justin Dolce, and Lori Nilo. We are all career advisors and here to support you in your career planning. And we right now are in the midst of kind of a series of workshops we're doing this quarter that are focused on, if you can make sure that you're muted, that would be great, everybody. Thank you. The focus around a lot of our programming this quarter is post-grad life. We know many of you are graduating either from your undergrad degree or grad degree coming up in the next couple months. And so we wanted to offer a series of workshops that are pertinent for that, you know, as you're transitioning or getting ready to transition, to help you in these next stages and as you're moving on beyond Seattle U. But these topics are also helpful for really anywhere where you are in your journey. And we hope that there are things you can utilize going forward. So really excited today to have our speaker, Jane Bilby. Jane is an alum of Albers from the MBA program. And she's also currently one of our Albers mentors with the Albers Mentor Program. She's been a mentor for us for 3 years. So it's great to have her giving back continually for us. So Jane is currently with Swift Group Marketing. She's Director of Business Operations, and she's also Microsoft HR Operations Senior Program Manager. And I just have a quick little bio to read for a little background about her, and then I'll turn it over to Jane. So Jane is a strategic and innovative HR professional. She's able to translate executive level business goals and vision into actionable HR and operational initiatives and processes that improve performance, profitability, growth, DEI, and employee engagement. She's an empowering and dynamic leader with extensive business acumen and demonstrated abilities in building beneficial business partnerships, leading highly effective teams, delivering innovative strategies to promote accountability and awareness around diversity and inclusion, drive employee engagement, skillfully recruit, hire, and retain talent, and lead organizational change. She's had a lot of experience in HR in all different facets. And so she's going to be able to kind of give you the insider scoop today from that often mysterious other side of things as you're job searching and going through that process. Real quick, just some housekeeping items. Jane is has a presentation, excuse me, but she also wants to have a lot of discussion and Q&A time as well. So we'll kind of have her go through her presentation and then we'll open it up for Q&A. During the Q&A time, you can either put questions in the chat, or you can be putting questions in the chat as we're going along, and we'll make sure to get to those. Or during the Q&A time, if you want to raise your hand and engage through video, we can also do that. So Jane, I will hand it over to you if you're ready.
I'm ready. Thank you for that intro, and hello everyone. Thank you for making the time and coming to this session. I was just sharing with Megan and the team that I have had this exact conversation with a number of my colleagues and friends lately. It's a big topic right now. How do I make sure I'm being paid fairly? How do I navigate that process? How do I show up and make sure I'm not leaving money on the table, but without stepping on the toes or feelings of the new employer that I'm excited to work for? So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. Like Megan said, please feel free to ask questions. I hope that I'll get to a lot of them. She sent me a lot of your questions ahead of time, so I was able to incorporate a lot of those in, and I want this to be time that is really beneficial for all of you, so please weigh in. A little bit more just background. Like Megan said, I got my MBA in 2016 and then got an HR certification shortly after that. I was working actually at Seattle U in the HR department while I was getting my MBA, and really love this connection between business and HR and how can these two functions really support each other. And I think neither can be successful without the buy-in of the other. And I believe in really transparent and respectful HR, meaning putting people first and being able to have hard conversations while also being respectful. So a lot of that comes through in a lot of the approaches that I'm going to discuss, because when you're showing up with employers, it really is two parties having a conversation. And I'll kind of get into more of that, but being able to show up in that kind of mutually respectful and transparent approach, I think generally helps the conversation go better. So I am happy to share my slides after, if that would be helpful, in kind of a PDF format, so you don't have to be furiously scribbling, and hopefully can just be present here with us in the conversation. There's a few resources and draft ways to respond to different questions. So that'll be, I'll send those to Megan and she can make those available to you all after. So jumping in, salary negotiations. I just took a new role, had to negotiate salary. I do some contracting, always have to negotiate rates. It's something you're going to do for the entirety of your career. And so when you get new jobs, promotions, when you push back to make sure you're being paid fairly, understanding the entire package of your offer is really important. And a lot of times we're taught to really focus on salary. So I'm going to be talking about how to negotiate that whole compensation package. So if you Google salary or offer negotiate, oh, I'm not sharing my presentation. Hold on, everyone. Oh, amateur hour. Okay, let's see here. I'm gonna move this guy. Thank you for bearing with me. There's that. So let me just get my two screens set up to be successful here. There we go. So as I'm sure a lot of you know, if you Google salary negotiation or offer negotiation, you'll see a lot of scripts. They're going to give you lots of things of what you should say, what you shouldn't say. I like to think of it a little bit more as you need to tailor these to the specific organization, to the specific role. It's never going to be the same conversation that you have multiple times. So during this conversation, it's going to be, how do you take the specific offer that you're given from a specific organization, and how do you tailor that to make a counter offer, make sure you're being considerate, using information that you've gathered from both outside resources and the organization to make the best, to have the best and most effective conversation. I've tried to include things that I've learned from my personal experience and professional experience in HR, as Megan said, kind of from behind the scenes. And I'm really going to be focusing on, how is the employer showing up? How can you be expecting what their kind of approach is? How do you have that conversation? One thing I did want to note is, some of you may be aware, Governor Inslee just passed legislation requiring employers to post salary ranges on positions starting in January of 2023. That may change some strategies in the coming year, but just a note that a lot of HR folks are talking, it likely employers may just put really broad ranges. So it may help you, it may not. So just something to be considering, that again, tailoring your specific offer in that situation is going to be really important. And then my biggest thing whenever I'm talking to anybody, and before I get into really the meat of the conversation, a job is an employment relationship between two parties. The employer is paying you for your time and for the services that you're providing, and you don't owe them anything, right? There's no apologies for asking for money. They aren't doing you a favor. You're entering into a relationship. And so it's payment for services. You have the right to understand how your pay was decided. You have the right to understand what you're eligible for in terms of benefits and what that total compensation is. And I always like to say, if, everyone's worried, well, if I push back, are they going to rescind the offer? I'll get into more of why they likely won't. But if they do, would you want to work for a company where when you asked for transparency and respect, they said no? So I think there's always that to consider as well. So going into just what we're going to be talking about, let's see if I can get this to do that. I've already done my intro talking about why negotiate the employer's perspective, total compensation. So considering that, thinking about what matters to you, what is your specific kind of value, what do you want in a job and employer, some steps on negotiating, answering some of your questions specifically. I've included a slide on offer letter basics because sometimes you can get these huge 2-page long offer letters and you're like, how do I navigate this? So we'll go through a bit of that. And then like Megan said, hopefully have some good time for Q&A. So I thought, oh, there it is. I thought this image was really interesting. So for new grads, only 38% of new grads are negotiating offers, which is pretty low. So it's something to be considering. But when they do negotiate, 80% of those folks are having success, at least partially, if not in salary, in other areas like benefits, schedule, PTO, other stock options. So that's something to consider. Only 38% of people are negotiating, but when they do, they have 80% success. So something to consider. And I also think this other figure, 90% of employers have never retracted an offer when somebody has tried to negotiate. So it's again something, so why is that? And I'm going to skip, I have an extra slide that I'll come back to here, but the employer perspective. It is so much work for an employer to go through a recruitment process. I know most of you have probably applied for jobs, either heard back, gone through the process, maybe not heard back. There's often a recruiter who has multiple positions they're recruiting for. They have tons of candidates. Once they get to an offer, once they've said, we want you to work for us, and here's the amount of money we want to pay you, they want you on their team. They don't want team. Employers and HR conversation, they've landed on you, they want you. Through that whole process, just because you asked for a little bit more money. Knowing that and leading yourself with that when you go into the conversations of they have picked you.
Jane, just FYI, you're kind of freezing in and out. I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I can hear you. Is it better?
You're good. Okay. Right now. It's just kind of like we'll freeze and we won't hear you and then you'll come back.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You're okay.
Well, hopefully the gist of it is coming through. Okay. A lot of employers will give a range. Sorry, no, that threw me off a little bit. A lot of employers build in room to negotiate. So a lot of employers will not give you the full, they'll be authorized up to a certain amount, but they might not necessarily give you that right off the bat, expecting you to negotiate. So another thing so building that into your idea of, should I negotiate or should I not? Something an employer takes into consideration when they're building the offer that they're going to extend to you. Market rates for the role. So I'm going to speak in more depth on the next slide for this. Their assessment of your ability to do the role. So based on internal equity, which again, I'll speak on one of the next slides, but what are others in the organization being paid to do the same work? Budget, how much have they been budgeted? And then your ability to negotiate. So what do you take it? So those top three are kind of within their discretion, and then you get to take it to the next level. So what this is this is an example of a salary range. So when we're considering salary ranges, it's important to keep in mind that every organization has their own pay structure. So they decide where a starting range and a starting point and an ending point for a range is. They may title things differently. So it's always important when you're considering an offer and you're going to these different sites, which I'll get into, that you're considering the actual roles and responsibilities for each role. The type of organization may impact salary range. If it's a nonprofit versus a for-profit versus a tech company. So what you're trying to get to is the organization that you're being offered. You want to know what the range is for your role, if you can. What is the minimum? What is the maximum? And where is the offer that you've been given fall in that range? So as you can see, this person has been offered 92,000. It's under the midpoint, which is pretty typical for organizations. The midpoint is thought to represent where you are fully capable of doing that role. So it's unlikely to be brought in generally at the midpoint of a range, because employers want to give you the opportunity to grow and develop within the salary range of that position over time. This isn't a science. This is kind of an art. So this may also be impacted by where others are paid in the range, where the employer likes to bring people in. So this is why it's important to ask that question. You get an offer of where do I fall in the range? What is the budgeted range for the role? What else? So like I said, it's totally acceptable to ask the recruiter or HR representative for the salary range. Thank you for the information. I'm so excited about this offer. Can you help me understand? Understanding the range and what skills and capabilities you bring to the role will help you to determine, should I negotiate my salary, or am I happy with where they've placed me within that range for that role? Moving on. So total compensation. This is where we get to not just the salary. So benefits. One of the questions I got was, and I get all the time, is, am I allowed to ask about the benefits? Can I ask for benefits plans? Absolutely. You want to make sure that you're asking to see those, because they do impact what you have to pay. If you're getting a certain amount of money but have to pay $500 a month for your medical insurance, that's going to impact how much you take home or your net income. So generally, what kind of a rule of thumb is to subtract about 30% to account for your federal taxes, health insurance premiums, 401k contributions. I've included a little example. So if somebody's coming into a role at 75,000, that take-home pay will be about 4,500 a month. Creating a realistic budget. So this is going to help you when you are going into different roles, or when you're applying for roles, if there's a range posted, when that recruiter really asks you what you're trying to make, having a realistic budget and knowing what your minimum is, regardless of the role. You should be doing this ahead of time, to help you understand if you need to walk away from a role, if what their budgeted range is below what you need in a role. Another piece is what to consider. So, okay, the salary, let's say, is acceptable. It's within your budget, but it's not exactly where you want it to be. Look at all of the other parts of the role. 401k match. Some organizations match 5%, 10%. That's a huge amount of match if you take advantage of it, which ultimately corresponds to a higher total compensation package. Health insurances. How much do you pay per month? How much does the employer pay? Time off, transit subsidies, professional development, wellness perks, thinking about schedule. Do they offer childcare? Is that applicable? So you can think about all these things. These are all parts of your total compensation, one, to consider when being given the offer, but also are available to you to negotiate. So it goes back to that piece of kind of, what do you value? So what matters to you? Is it really that salary? Is that the only thing that you're really driving towards? Do you really need a flexible work schedule? Do you want to have in-office work? Do you want the opportunity to be exposed to certain leaders, different leadership styles, an organization with a strong internal promotion culture? So these are all things, in addition to all of those other pieces, that you can negotiate. If you want to ask for a certain budget every year for professional development as a part of your salary, so that's not coming out of your budget. different things to be considering as a part of your offer negotiation. So I didn't include it on this slide, but one thing that you'll often hear is try to avoid sharing your number first. And I try to be realistic. It's hard to do that sometimes. Sometimes the recruiter is really aggressive and they say, you know, we need to know, or we must know, or it's a required field on the application. You are, one, not required to share what you're currently making. So usually it'll be phrased as, what do you want to make? If you can avoid it, it's helpful trying to say things, and I have another slide that we'll get to, of, well, I want to make sure that I'm paid fairly. I want to be within whatever range and make sure that that's equitable for my level of experience. But when we're going into the offer, thinking about a salary negotiation is just a discussion. It's a discussion, and both you and the employer have the same goal. Both parties want you working for that company. You have a slightly different approach, right? The employer, usually the person making the offer, it's their job to get you to come on for as reasonable of a price as is possible, right? They're trying to do their job. So they've been told, hire this person, here's your max, bring it in at whatever, you can. You're coming in and doing your job of securing a job that pays you fairly for the work that you're going to be providing. So sometimes it's this adversarial or kind of, oh no, like they're not going to want to have this conversation. They want to hire you and you have the same goal. It's just about having an amenable and effective conversation to get you there. And then the worst case is that they say no, and hopefully you've managed the process where they say no with a level of explanation, or they offer or are able to address some other concern. So one other thing I'll say is it's so important to negotiate on the phone or on a video conversation, because these are the types of things you want to make sure that you know your why and that you're showing up and being able to have that conversation. If you respond in email, it's going to be much less effective. They're not going to be able to see you or hear you and have that same connection. It's going to be much more of a transaction rather than a relationship conversation. And so I would highly, highly recommend that at least you do it over the phone, if not being able to jump on a video call or have a conversation as face-to-face as is possible in today's kind of virtual world. And then just be confident. They have chosen you, and now you're just discussing the terms of that employment relationship. So moving on. So focusing on the facts and criteria. So, and then presenting multiple options. Again, it's hard to negotiate when you don't know where you fall. So it's always important to ask for more information. If they haven't shared a range with you, if they just give you a number, my favorite way to approach it is, thank you so much for the offer. I am so excited to work at the company. Before I, accept, I'd like to understand better how my role, like what the range is and where I fall within it. Being able to have the information allows you to come up with an effective counteroffer. If you are at the midpoint of the range, if you're at the higher end of the range, maybe it doesn't make sense to negotiate a salary increase. Maybe it makes more sense to negotiate more PTO, or maybe it makes sense to negotiate a signing bonus. So knowing when and where to push can help you be more effective in actually getting to a yes. And then knowing the why behind your ask. So as an example, I just had a friend who accepted a new role. She wasn't going to get her medical benefits for 90 days. So she was going to have to pay for COBRA for 3 months of benefits. So it was going to be about a $3,000 cost to her to have medical benefits for those 3 months in between when she quit her current job and when she became benefits eligible. So she went to her employer, said, I'm so excited to work for you. The offer looks great. I'm going to request a signing bonus of $5,000 to cover the costs it's going to take me to make the transition, including paying for medical benefits. And they said, sure thing, no problem, done. And she was able to sign the offer and offset that cost. So having reasons, whether it be, I don't think this is, fair compensation based on the market, or I'd like to understand better why I'm so low in the range, and push back by being able to say, is there a skill that drove that, and providing examples around how you do have that skill. Maybe it didn't come across in the interview as strongly. So being able to understand how they came to the package, including salary, benefits, and being able to then use your circumstances, your experience, your objective research to be able to push back on that. Moving right along. Good phrases. So these are things that the number one thing that I use, I probably say this phrase at least 10 times a day when I'm working with employees, is, can you help me understand? So this phrase, rather than what does this mean or why is it this way, you're insinuating that that they have put rationale behind their decision. You just don't understand that rationale. Rather than trying to attack why something is the way that it is, this leads with curiosity and respect. So can you help me understand why I'm at the lower end of the salary range? Can you help me understand what about my skill set has led me to be placed there, and what I would need to do to be at a higher level? This really, again, like I said at the beginning, coming at this discussion like you are two equal parties having this conversation, and that they have shown up in best kind of good faith and with best intentions, is going to get you to a more positive solution. I'm excited by the opportunity to work together, to work at the company. Based on my research, is that number flexible? I would be more comfortable at this rate. This would be what, would make me feel more fairly compensated. If you can do that, I'm on board, right? So they're trying to get to a yes. And oftentimes employers are afraid during negotiations, if you ask for something and they give it to you, that you're still going to just be considering. But if you say, hey, if you can give me a $5,000 increase to base annual, I will sign the offer letter today. It speeds up their negotiations because it makes sure you're not maybe leveraging their offer letter for another role. So thinking about the negotiation of, how do I get what I want and also give them what they want, right? So they want you to sign on. So if you can assure me and send me an offer letter with a $5,000 signing bonus attached, I'll sign it today. So again, thinking about that give and take will be more incentivizing for them to move that process along quickly. And then thank you. So I think this is a big one, is making sure to thank them for the offer, even if it's not what you maybe were expecting. Again, priming that conversation to be respectful. Thank you so much. I'd like to think about it. Coming back, thank you again for the offer. And I'd like to discuss better kind of the terms and get a better understanding of where it came from. What if they say no? I've been in this situation. So if you push back and they say no, now it's up to you. One, don't take it personally. Sometimes they've offered you the full amount that they've been budgeted to do, and they cannot give you any more. At that point, it's about internal budget. And now it's your decision of if that role is above what your minimum required monthly income is, and if the role is worth it enough for you to take a job maybe lower than what you wanted to. I remember when I graduated with my MBA, I was like, yes, I'm going to go out and get a job that's just, I'm going to make way more money than I'm making. And I got my first job offer, which is where I then worked for 5.5 years, the Seattle Metro Chamber of Commerce. And it was kind of a want moment. And I asked for more. They weren't able to give me more. And I was kind of like, ugh. And then I really sat back and I thought, okay, the benefits are really great. The regular basis and in a really meaningful way. So I took the job, and it wound up being a really great opportunity. And I'm so sorry. I see Megan, I see you going in and out. So I'm so sorry. I'm out.
You're doing great, Jane. No, you just cut out on you said the benefits were great. And then what else about the job was?
Oh yeah. The benefits were great. The PTO was really, and it was a flexible work environment. It was people that I really wanted to work with, and I got to interface with the business community. And ultimately, that interface with business leaders and that level of responsibility that the role was giving me and the opportunity for growth internally, I accepted the job at a lower compensation level and then was able to grow my career from there. So I made that decision of, I pushed back, I asked for more, they said no. Now I have to look at the offer and say, is this what I want? Or do I want to go through a different process and really get a job at a higher salary level? So if they say no, then it's up to you and you get to decide. You can always ask for a revisiting. So if they say no, you can say, okay, that's, I understand that there are constraints. I'd like to ask and have it built into my offer letter to have my salary revisited maybe in 3 months, in 6 months. So you can kind of understand. Another thing, and I think I cover this, but I do. It's my next bullet, is eligibility for salary increases. So sometimes you want to understand where in the performance review cycle you'll be coming in. So let's say a company's calendar year is January to December, and they review salaries in October. They review performance in October. If you're hired September, you're not going to likely be, or even in August, you won't be considered for a salary increase that close. So your next opportunity would be over a year away. So asking that question too, when is the next scheduled round of salary increases, and will I be eligible for that? Because that could then impact, okay, well, great. So I'm not going to be eligible for another 14 months. I'd like to ask that my salary be reviewed in 6 months. So building in the opportunity for you to revisit that conversation in a way that's documented is really can help set you up for that, rather than having to taking the job and then being disappointed that your next scheduled conversation is over a year away. Something to consider. Okay, so what is my next slide? Some of your questions. So can I ask to see benefits? Yes, absolutely. How do you take emotion out of the process? Again, setting your budget and minimum and desired salaries ahead of time to try to help make sure that you are clear on what you need going into those conversations. Get as much information about the specific offer package and their pay structure. Sometimes it can feel, demoralizing when you're expecting something and it's lower. But then if you realize that relative to the organization, you're paid really fairly, that can help change the way that you're approaching the offer. Do I have to negotiate in real time? Yes. Again, try to avoid email. Email makes things transactional, and somebody can say no a lot easier in email than they can to your face. Which contact should I negotiate with? Whichever person you've had the most consistent contact with. So know that that person probably does not own the decision to give you more or not. So that sometimes makes it a little bit of an easier conversation, because then they have to go and have that conversation internally. But don't have it with the hiring manager if you've been working with the recruiter. No, ask the person who you have had the most consistent contact with, because again, there's that relationship that you can fall back on, and it's easier to get to that yes and to know how to interact with that person. Again, what if they say no? Time to make your decision. The ball is in your court at that point. And will they pull my offer if I ask for more? I don't ever want to say, no, they won't, because there are probably some crazy organizations out there that might. but they're probably not going to. And again, would you want to work there if they do? Because that, again, as you're going through interview processes, and I know this isn't about interviewing, so I won't go off on this tangent too much, but interviews are two-way streets. You're also trying to decide if you want to work for that company, and how they show up in the offer process is going to tell you some information about what that company values and how they treat employees and how future conversations may go. Next, so here are some example responses. So please tell me your salary history or current salary. For those of you just graduating who maybe don't have work history, I've just completed a degree and gained valuable hands-on experience through projects and internships. My salary history doesn't reflect that. I'm not going to read all of these. Like I said, I'll make these available. But again, it's about repositioning the conversation and being confident rather than, if you're asked a question, you don't have to answer it. You can redirect the conversation. What are your salary expectations? I need to learn more about the responsibilities of the job and the benefits you offer, right? Or I want to move this, I want this to be a big step forward in terms of both responsibility and compensation. I'd be curious to hear what the salary range is. Can you please share that information? So these are just some examples to help you practice, and I would recommend actually practicing saying these words out loud, getting comfortable saying this so that when you are face to face or on the phone with somebody, you can say that a little bit more authentically. So this slide, I know there's a lot on here, but I wanted to speak briefly to understanding offer letters. So a lot of the things that you will see on offer letters are part-time versus full-time. This one's a little easy. This is one of the easier ones. So how many hours a week are you working? Hourly versus salaried. This describes how you're paid. Are you paid the same amount every month, regardless of hours you work, or are you paid for every hour that you're working? Similar to that is exempt versus non-exempt. This one is always confusing. If you are exempt, that means you do not get overtime. You're exempt from overtime regulations. If you're non-exempt, that means you do receive overtime pay. So this is an important designation because this can really impact your take-home pay depending on the position. And I'm so sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so I feel like I'm starting to get a little congested in my, it's not the best voice to listen to. Benefits eligibility date. So when do you become eligible for different benefits? This is important. Remember that example, my friend had to wait 90 days before she was eligible for benefits. You're potentially leaving money. If you're not eligible for the 401k for a year, some employers require a year of service before your 401k match comes into play. That could be up to $5,000 to $8,000, potentially more, that you're not getting in that first year. So be thinking about that. Often offer letters outline additional benefits. So commission structure or bonus structure, a signing bonus, transit or other stipends you may receive. Your annual or hourly pay rate. So again, this is, you're told how that look like. Start date, that which means you or the employer can terminate the relationship at any time. If it is a contract, that would be more of kind of a contractor short term. So likely the offer letter will state that the employer is at will. Confidentiality clauses are pretty common. What that means is that you are required to keep any information, tools, or data confidential. Non-solicitation, this prevents you from pursuing clients or projects after you leave an organization. So if you are working really closely with a client as an account manager, and then you move to a competitor, you can't bring up your contact and say, hey, I've moved, you should come with me. Mandatory arbitration. So this basically, if you have an issue with the organization, if you think you're owed more wages, etc., this prevents you from going to court to discuss those. It means you have to go through an arbitration process, which is basically a private discussion that is not public record. So this is something to consider. And then non-compete clauses. Generally, non-competes are unenforceable, so know that. A lot of companies try to put them in, but generally they are unenforceable if they're unreasonable, but it would prevent you from joining a competitor for a certain amount of time after leaving your employer. So, and what I didn't put in here, but I have in my notes and in the notes of the slide are some extra resources and websites that you can go to look up salaries that are kind of reputable, including one that most people don't think to go to, which is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS. So that's actually the federal government runs that, and you're able to really dissect jobs based on where you're at in the country. So if you're considering cross-country moves, you're able to really dissect for and nonprofit work, which generally is really hard when you're doing your own research to kind of suss out the difference, because you could look up a title for a tech company project manager, go to a nonprofit and be very disappointed because the salary range may be very different. So that BLS can be really helpful in trying to get an accurate reflection of what salary ranges different industries and different types of organizations offer. So with that, I'm going to take a drink and let you all decide, and I'll see if I'm going to stop presenting so I can see folks if they decide to come on camera, and I'm going to take a pause and see if there's been anything in the chat or any questions. Megan, did I go?
Super helpful. There's a lot of good stuff in here I haven't heard before, so it's really great. Yes, people start, if you have any questions, fill them in the chat, or we can raise hand. We are recording this, so I've had multiple questions around that. So, because your script phrases and stuff are super helpful. So yes, we will record this, and maybe one of my teammates can put our YouTube playlist link in the chat. That would be great. Melissa, you have your hand raised. Hi.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
I wanted to ask that I heard like your first job determines the rest of your career. Is that true in terms of like salary?
Yeah, I mean, I think as is with most things, it's relative. So especially if you're going to be with an organization for a long time, yes, the salary that you come in at. So if you think about, and I'm going to pick an easy number, let's say you come in at 50,000. If you get a 1% raise every year, you would be getting a $5,000 raise every year. If you come in at 60,000, your raise is going to be significantly higher, and it's going to be exponential growth. So yes, your base annual. So if I had an option when I'm taking a job for a $10,000 signing bonus or a $10,000 annual salary, I personally would take the annual salary, because that is going to then impact every single promotion or raise that I get from there on. While as nice it would be to get that 10,000 today and what I could do with that, that's going to impact every raise you get in that role. Does it impact your entire career forever? No, would be the answer, right? So like I said, when I got my MBA, I took the job at the chamber for way less than I was expecting to get when I graduated with my MBA. Within 3 years, I was above where I thought I was going to be in 3 years, right? So I think it doesn't, just taking a job, even if it's a little bit lower than where you want to be, does not mean for the rest of your career you are going to be paid less. You want to have that starting salary obviously be as high as you can to be fairly paid and make sure that you're taking advantage of those incremental increases. But if you decide to take a role, I would say I would rather take a role like that at a little bit less money a year than take a job that's a little bit higher where I'm not going to get that development and growth, especially at the beginning of my career. Yeah.
Question, Melissa. Thank you. Jane, another one in the chat was, where's the most accurate place to get salary ranges for roles? I mean, obviously from the employer, but if you're trying to do research ahead of time, what are some really accurate places to look that up?
Yeah, and I'll send it out with the slide. I'll add
Okay.
a slide in there with that. Really asking the employer is going to be the number one accurate place. There is salary.com. There's, like I said, Bureau of Labor Statistics is a really helpful one. Pay scale is one that's really been helpful as well. And then, yeah, I would start with those ones. You have to always take everything you find on the internet with a grain of salt. I think use it as a base, use it as a way to frame your reference. And every organization is going to have a different budget. You can usually look up, if you're going for nonprofits, you can look up their tax documents and see what their annual budget is. Sometimes that gives you an idea. If an organization's annual budget is 5 million, they're not going to be giving you a $150,000 offer for an entry, so you can kind of start to look at some of those pieces and look online for some of those pieces.
Great. Do we have to wait 6 months or 1 year before we ask to negotiate salary, or can we ask anytime for a salary range or a package change?
So you can ask at any time. I would never encourage someone to not, if you really think you're not being paid fairly. And usually organizations have timing and structure built around an annual process or semi-annual. Sometimes organizations do it 2 times a year. And usually you can ask, but organizations, in order to try to keep equity and keep things clear and keep things in line with how they're performing financially, aren't going to make decisions on off-cycle kind of cadences, even if you ask for it. One thing to think about is if your role has significantly changed. So let's say you're in between that year performance review, your colleague left and they were like, hey, we're going to actually have you take on a whole new body of work from your colleague's portfolio, and we're not going to rehire that role. I would say, hey, I want my role reassessed, right? I think I'm doing more work now, and I want my salary to be I want to relook at, make sure I'm being compensated for this new body of work. So if your role significantly changes, I think that's the time to, on an off cycle, really push for a reassessment of role and reassessment of salary. You obviously can ask at any time, but you're really going to want to figure out, what is your organization's cadence? How are they thinking about salary? Because you're not probably going to be super successful asking for an off cadence unless there's been a significant role change.
Great, thanks, Jane. Wendy, you have your hand up. You want to go?
Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Jane. Thank you for your time today. I actually am having a salary review tomorrow, so this is perfect timing. And I ended up falling within that range that you said. Like, I got hired like in November, so I've been waiting like a year plus for this conversation. I just had my performance review last month. So obviously inflation is a big factor in salaries and negotiating that. So definitely expecting like a salary increase, but when it comes to that pay scale that you mentioned, what should I be expecting from an employer? Like, I feel like I should be expecting more than the 3% raise from last year and this year. But I guess I'm trying to see, once I do see that pay scale, how do I bring it up? Is it okay to ask the manager or the supervisor, like, what is the pay scale right off the bat?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things you can ask. One, if they say, okay, so your salary, again, even numbers, your salary is 50,000, we're giving you a 10% increase and you're going to be at 55. Understanding, what does that raise? What is that comprised of? How much is that cost of living? How much is performance? And getting an understanding of, usually organizations will say, okay, everyone's getting a cost of living adjustment. What is that? Everyone's getting 1% or 2% or 3%. And then you may get additional performance-based increases. How well, Wendy, are you doing in your role on top of that 3%? when I was in charge of doing this for employees, I would always spell it out. I want employees to know you're getting 6%. 3 of that is everyone's getting, and you're getting an extra 3%. Some organizations don't do that. I think it's totally fair to ask, like, can you help me understand what this raise is comprised of? Like, is there a COLA, cost of living adjustment? Is this based on performance? And then with that, based on my new salary, where do I fall within the salary range for the role that I'm in? And it's totally reasonable and totally appropriate to ask that information. Once you get it, then you can ask more questions like, can you help me understand why I've been here for a year and a half and I'm still below the midpoint? Is there something I need, why did I not get a performance-based, or what was the average performance-based increase? Then you can kind of dig in from there to better understand. Again, either to push back or to be like, oh, okay, I'm actually happy with what I got based on organizational averages and kind of what the general average raise was.
Okay, thank you.
Is that
helps out
helpful?
much. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Jane, you mentioned it in your talk. I get a lot of questions around that initial ask when you're applying. So that application question or whatever, however they're asking, what salary are you expecting? There's a lot of pressure. How much pressure really is there on that? Like, can it hurt a candidate if they put a salary and it's just way out of the range that they would pay? Might they go, oh, we're not going to consider them because they're like, how much stock should you put into researching before you even answer that application question, I guess?
If it's that's a great question. If it's a required question, one, it makes me roll my eyes as an HR professional, but if it's a required question, yes, I think it can hurt you if you are way out of range for a role. They may just not want to waste your time or theirs because they're asking because they want to know, is it worth the time to ask this to involve this candidate in the whole process? Like I said at the beginning, they're paying a recruiter to have all of those conversations. That's company time that they're paying out the door. And if it's going to be a 30-minute phone conversation, an hour-long panel interview, just to find out that your salary expectations don't align with what they have budgeted, it's not a good use of anybody's time. So I think I would actually think it would be better to, and I know this sounds a little counterintuitive, it'd be better to be under the range and kind of lowball that than to highball it. So it's better to be, I think you're penning yourself in less by, let's say it's a role that you've done your research and the average is 75,000 to 100,000. I think you're better off putting 80,000 than you are 100,000, because you aren't saying, I want to be paid 80,000. You're saying, I need at least 80,000. That's how I would go into it. And then you'll at least be considered in the process. And then you can have those more authentic and kind of direct conversations around, I know I put 80, I put that not knowing at all what the X organization's range for the role is. So before I accept an offer, I want to understand what your specific role range is for the role. So I think it's actually, Megan, to answer your question very directly, I think it's more harmful to be way outside the range and above it than to be a little bit below it.
Thanks, Jane.
Yeah.
A few more in the chat. Any additional considerations when you're working with a recruiting agency? Like a Robert Half or a, Kelly Services or?
They're going to be taking a margin, right? So the organization's paying more than you're getting because that organization is serving as an interim. So I don't know if that's a pro or a con, because they're doing the legwork of finding the employer and finding the role, and usually get plugged into things a little bit easier. There's usually a less intensive recruiting process. You're usually not as involved in discussing that rate. It's usually a little bit more kind of straightforward, but there's a cost to that. It's sometimes you likely will not, one, get paid as much because the organization is still paying that high amount. You're just not seeing all of it. And two, you are probably not getting benefits from either organization. So that is also something to consider.
There are some good questions in here. Any recommendations for those who might be working in a company as an intern and then the company extends a job offer?
Yeah, I mean, usually you have a little bit better idea of what the kind of company culture is like around negotiating, around transparency. You can leverage your internship experience as part of your kind of, I already know the culture. The cost to onboard me is lower because I'm ready to just step into the role. You can kind of leverage that. It's easier for them, so they likely aren't going to have to go through as rigorous of a recruiting process, or they can get you started a lot sooner. So I don't know if I generally have, I think you would approach it very similarly of, again, asking for the range, understanding if that's something that you can accommodate in your own personal kind of budgeting. But I think you're just at a slight advantage of being able to really tailor the way that you're asking to the way that the organization functions from a culture and kind of communication style standpoint.
Okay, maybe one more. Are you okay?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
This is a very timely one. Recommendations on how to address cost of living raises, like especially with inflation the way it is right now. Do employees have a leg to stand on here? It seems like most companies are sticking to the standard 2 to 3%.
It's this gets to be a little higher, I think, of a conversation than individual employee. No, I think is the answer. If you individually as an employee, you are likely not going to change the way that the organization has budgeted, right? And they likely are not going to make exceptions for you. I think that as the great resignation and kind of great transfer of talent is happening, I think more organizations are thinking more critically. So I think organizations are starting to realize that they have to keep up with not just the cost of living, but the cost of labor and what that means, which is those are two very different. I don't have the time now, but if you want to look up the difference between cost of living and cost of labor, there are different things that are taken into consideration. So unfortunately, I hate saying no, but generally an organization has determined how much they're going to pay for cost of living adjustments. And it gets to be a slippery slope if you start to give somebody else a higher COLA than somebody. I mean, then it just kind of takes all of your legitimacy away as an organization. So no, and you're more likely to get a bigger increase by changing jobs at that point because their compensation philosophy and structure is likely already cemented.
Oh, Jane, this has been so great. Thank you. There's still some questions, but I know we're at the hour and I want to make sure I know people have class and you have things to get on to. So maybe if it's like really pressing, you're welcome to email me or somebody on our team and then we can see if Jane can maybe answer it. And then
or connect with me on LinkedIn. Yes.
Yeah, that'd be
happy. Yeah. Would be happy to would be happy to connect. And this is something I feel really strongly about and I'm really passionate about. So please feel free to send me a message or like Megan said, send her an email and she can route it to me. Would be happy to help you all. And Wendy, good luck in your conversation tomorrow. Be strong and be confident. You got this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jane. We really appreciate it. And everybody, we'll put this up hopefully on our YouTube channel by tomorrow. And when Jane shares the slides, I'll have all your names from who attended today. So I'll try to send it out via email because I know a lot of those scripts are going to be helpful and things to say. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope this was helpful. Just a quick plug. We have a couple other things coming up in this week and next week. Those of you, I know there's a lot of grad students on the call. So in two days, on the 21st, we are putting on the Grad Career Connections networking event. This is an actual in-person event. So if you haven't been to an in-person career event in a while, you'll definitely want to attend this one. We're really excited about it. It's 4:30 on Thursday up in Casey Commons. So kind of kitty corner to Piggott. And we'll be on the top floor, and there'll be some of our mentors there and employers and alumni. So if you're in the career exploration mode or just job search or just wanting to be expanding your networking connections, please join us for that 4:30 to 6:30. More information on Handshake. And then next week, we'll continue this series, the Post-Grad Life series. A week from today at 12:30, it'll be about mental health in times of transition. Particularly during that, time frame as you're, kind of in your mid-20s, upper 20s, just all the transitioning that's happening in life during that time. How do you manage that and have self-care around that? And then the day after that, on Wednesday, we'll be doing mock interviews with employers. I think grad is full, but you can be added to the wait list. And then undergrads, we still have some spots if you want to practice interviewing with some recruiters. So lots going on to support you in your job search. And then as always, you can make an appointment to see any of us in the placement center. Hope this was helpful. Again, thank you, Jane. So appreciate it. Great wisdom and information today. And we hope you all have a great rest of the day. Thanks for